With our y-axis created, it's time to now create our x-axis and x-grid lines. So we'll head to our code, and just before we created the y-axis, we'll type the following: var x-axis equals d3.svg.axis. And we'll set the scale for the axis to the x scale, and we'll orient the axis at the bottom of the chart. So let's go down to the call for plot. And for params, which is this object here, we created an entry called axis, and that has our y-axis. So we'll add to that an x colon x-axis, and then comma. And don't forget the comma, you'll get an error because you forgot to separate these two properties. Okay, with that, we can go to our draw axis function, which is right here at line 59. So just after we created the y grid line, but before we create the y-axis, this dot append G, so make a new group, and we're going to give it the class axis x and true. We'll set the transform attribute translate 0, 0. Now the thing is, though, we need to move the x-axis. We've done this before, and so the way that we'll do that is for the second 0, which is the position from the top, blank it out, end the string and start the string, and then put the height as the value, so that in the end we're getting translate parentheses 0, comma, whatever the height is. Finally, we need to call our axis, params.axis.x. Save that, head to the web page and refresh, and there's our x-axis at the bottom of the screen. Now I don't like the numbers here because they leave out 18 at the very left and our maximum value 74 at the very right. So we're going to use a feature of D3 that lets us explicitly set the tick values. So we'll go back up to the axis, and just before x-axis, I'll create a new variable and call it tick values. And the array will be an array of tick values. So 18, 25, 32, 39, 46, 53, 60, 67, and 74. Now, what I'll do is go into the x-axis declaration. Just after setting the x scale, it'll be tick values, open and close parentheses, tick values. Save it, refresh, and you can see we have nice tick values that are from 18 to 74, and we're good to go. So let's create now the grid lines. Go back to the code, and just after the x-axis, var x grid lines equals d3.svg.axis. The scale is the same, it's x. And as well, the tick values here are going to be the same as our x-axis. So tick values is tick values. Orientation will be at the bottom. Okay, we'll scroll down, and within the plot.call portion of the code, we want to look for grid lines where we set the y grid lines. And now we're going to set the x grid lines. So x colon x grid lines. Don't forget the comma. Now let's go into the draw axis function. And we will draw this just before we draw the y grid lines. This append G, make a group, class it as grid line singular, and x true. Then we'll copy the line that has the transform for the x-axis and paste it because it has the interpolation of the height within the string. And then dot call, and we'll call params.axis.gridlines.x. Save that, head to the web page and refresh. And I'm not seeing it, but that's okay because we need to further format the x grid lines. So let's go back up to their definition, which is here under x grid lines. Now we need to change the tick size, so dot tick size, and that's going to be the height of the chart. And we also need to set the second argument to height. And the tick format, just an empty string. We should have done negative height, not positive height. Save that, refresh, and there we have the grid lines being drawn from the bottom of the chart to the top, and they're perfectly aligning with our new tick values because in both cases of the x-axis and the x grid lines, we're using this tick values array where we custom set each of the tick values. And that's really useful, especially if you have tick values that aren't even. In this case, they are. But if you've got some that are, let's say, at spacings of 2, 3, and then 5, and then 10, or something like that, you can just set them manually. So now we've got the x-axis set, the y-axis set, And we have a little more context as to what the data represents, but we're still not done because we still need to style this data. And as well, we need to incorporate the interaction, and that's coming up.